And to repay its $3 billion debt to Russia, Ukraine's made a statement today.
Уряд України сьогодні запроваджує
Today, the Ukrainian government has imposed a moratorium on the repayment of the so-called Russian debt. All repayments are halted until we make restructuring proposals or a relevant court decision is made.
That's despite the International Monetary Fund, which is Ukraine's main creditor, admitting Wednesday that the country's debt to Russia is official and is sovereign. That means it cannot be restructured like one's owed to private creditors. However, last week the IMF made another decision. It announced a change to its own rules to effectively allow financial aid to countries in arrears with other governments. Ditto Ukraine. That's exactly the case. Previously, the organisation was very strict when dealing with countries in that situation. Let's see what Max Kaiser thinks about it. Of course, RT's star economist on the line now. Is Ukraine effectively in default here?
Hi, Kevin. Great to be on. No, I heard Victoria Nuland's going to cover this multi-billion-dollar debt along with Joe Biden. No, only kidding. This is a very interesting situation because the IMF, of course, is instrumental in all of this. And they have a standing rule that countries that are in debt on a sovereign basis cannot get IMF loans. And yet Ukraine has gotten IMF loans, and now they're defaulting on their loans to Russia. Now the IMF is saying, yes, that is in fact a sovereign loan. You owe the money to Russia. And of course, there's a war going on, or a bit of a kerfuffle, I should say. Yeah. And so this all gets all mixed up, and the IMF is really the key player.
Putin's offered terms here, so why, you know, if you borrow money, you generally have to pay it back, especially when it's country to country. How can it get away with this, Ukraine?
Well, that's a good point. I mean, you know, the IMF again is a bad actor in all this, in my view, because if you go back to the situation in Greece. Well, I had Yanis Varoufakis on my show recently, his former finance minister. He said the IMF aided and abetted New York hedge funds like John Paulson to destroy Greece using financial terrorism, aided and abetted by the IMF. But, you know, Greece wasn't in this situation that the Ukraine finds itself in, which is, you know, being the puppet master of Victoria Nuland, trying to introduce Monsanto products and all other American garbage. And so they find themselves in a different situation. The IMF is completely inconsistent. And of course, Christine Lagarde is embroiled in a huge scandal with Bernard Tapie in France. And the previous IMF director, of course, was Dominic Strauss-Kahn, another scandalous kind of inept, corrupt government official, or I should say IMF official as well.
Going back to the case Ukraine, of course, you just mentioned Greece there. Greece will be looking on very interestingly here because it'll be saying, hang on a minute, if it was a very strict rule for us, how come that, you know, Ukraine can borrow money and not pay it back? Let me just be clear here. Is it in default or not, as you see it, Ukraine?
I'm sorry, are you saying is it a legitimate default or an illegitimate default? If that's the question, the answer is it's completely illegitimate. And, you know, Russia has to have the patience to sort through this wrangle of conflicted interest that all seem to be beneficial to the IMF and the people involved in the IMF. You know, they put Ukraine on essentially the same kind of carving table that they put Greece on. You know, Ukraine's not going to get out of this in any way, shape, or form with any financial stability or financial sovereignty at all.
And the US has been previously praising what it called Ukraine's ambitious economic reform plan. Has that all fallen by the wayside now? I wonder if there'll be such a glowing praise from the US for Ukraine after this.
No, absolutely not. I mean, Kevin, in my view, the Ukraine situation is caught up in not only a NATO expansion, but American corporation expansion, specifically Monsanto and genetically modified seeds. Victoria Nuland's husband advises Monsanto, and this is the crux of the problem. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin has said that he wants to make Russia as a genetically modified organism free zone, GM free. Okay, now that anyone who wants food safety, anyone who likes to eat healthy food, would support that position. That's a fantastic position. But of course, that would be terrible for Monsanto, Victoria Nuland, her husband, the IMF, and all these, you know, even Medvedev, who's the prime minister over there, he referred to Ukraine as a bunch of crooks as a result of this very issue. So I have to agree with him. Next time in Moscow, when I plan to be there soon, again, I'm going to bring this point up with the Kremlin.
I think you'll be off your Ukrainians' Christmas card list, though, today, Max. Thank you for your, coming onto the programme. It was nice to see you get your take on it.